Hi, Dennis Weiss, Eagle Communications. Welcome to Why Like Ike. Troy Elkins, are we in our happy place or what?
Favorite part of the museum.
Favorite part of the museum. We are going to talk to you about the weapons that were used in World War II, and we're going to talk to you about the museum itself. We're going to talk about what's happening, what's coming, but they let us film here. Makes us happy.
Makes me very happy.
Okay, so we are going to focus on squad rifles today. Squad equipment.
Squad equipment, the TO&E of the U.S. Army squad landing on D-Day in 1944.
Oh my goodness.
Basically, once the war started, the Army continued evolving and improving on how it was fighting its battles. It fought on a principle of fire and maneuver. The basic unit for the Army was the platoon, but below that was the squad level, and each squad had a designation of scout, of rifleman, grenadier, and automatic rifleman. So for the rifleman,
carried greatest battle implement ever devised, Georgie Patton.
One of his favorites, and this is actually a presentation model that's been donated to us. It was built by H&R in 1954, so it's post-war.
Yeah.
But this is the weapon that the U.S. carried for the most part during World War II. The U.S. was the only infantry force that had a predominant number of semi-automatic weapons. The British, the Germans, all the other forces carried, for the most part, bolt actions.
So right out there is a group of grandpas going, my M1 Garand, my M1 Garand.
It was a great weapon for its time, and still a very collector-specific
wow, that
weapon.
thing is slick.
Yes,
so I'm going to rest it on my hip here, but also you have a national match, brand new quality sling, which is quite collectible in its own right. Wow, and that came in from a collection, right?
Yes.
Somebody donated this weapon to you.
Pretty much all these weapons that you can see here that we'll have on the table came from one collection.
Here.
And he was a great benefactor to the Eisenhower Museum back in 1968.
Look at the grain of the wood there.
Yeah.
So you're going to hear this 10 times today, if not 20. We're still looking for donation of weapons collections, of individual things, and we're going to prompt you as we go, so pay attention.
Okay.
All right.
So this would be the most part for what guys were carrying. They could also come equipped with a grenade launcher on the top, and your grenadiers would have that grenade launcher and be able to fire anti-personnel and anti-armor grenades.
So, because we're famous for this, while you lay that down, we're going to do a segue. So I have to tell you a story. So my dad, World War II, he was the youngest of 3 boys that went to the war. He was fairly significant difference. So he went in the late war years. So during his qualification with the M1 Garand, his Garand would shoot 4 times and spit the clip. It's supposed to shoot 8 and spit the empty clip. So it would shoot 4 times and spit the clip. And of course his sergeant wasn't very happy with his performance with 4 shots on target.
Right.
So my father, who was an excellent shot, was explaining this to him. So they sent it to the armory, they worked on it, they brought it back, same thing, 4 shots, spit the clip. So he said, if you just give me one of those old bolt actions, I'll be fine. And they did. They brought him a 1903 Springfield, and life went on with his marksmanship sharpshooter award. That's my father-in-law's favorite weapon, the BAR.
The Browning automatic rifle. And this is actually a weapon that was designed for trench warfare in World War I. By the time it was developed and put into the field, the war was over. These went back into the stockpile and got a little bit of facelift prior to World War II.
Can you do about 100 deep knee squats with that over your head, Troy?
This thing's a beast. It weighs 20 pounds, which is about 8 pounds more than the squad automatic weapon does.
You didn't really shoot these offhand.
No, you did not.
Which explains the bipod device on the front, explains the carry handle in the middle.
Right.
And you and I were talking ahead of the camera coming on that there was an attachment, you take it and I'll point it out, on the butt where one could...
It actually would go right in there.
Right there, okay, there's the hole. This is your back pod, and if you and it had a dial on it, had a turn wheel on it, so you spun it up for elevation. And the rotation out of the bipods where you directed fire on the muzzle end, but My father-in-law always said you dial in both ends of a bar and you can lay them in a long ways out there.
It is a very accurate weapon. It had a nice long range. 30-06 gave it a tremendous punch. Each man in the squad would probably carry a couple of extra magazines, and because this is your support. This is your biggest fan when you're out in the field.
I want to re-say that because that's different from the strategy we have today. Each man in the squad carried for the BAR gunner a couple extra magazines,
right.
Not just the BAR gunner, but they were so important that riflemen were carrying bar magazines to help out your bar
Correct.
gunner. Yeah, very cool. That is a beast. So as we go through this today, I want to point out to those of you who may not be interested in weapons, these are some also the finest machines that were made during World War II. The machining on these weapons is immaculate, is the finest piece of engineering we had during the war. We've talked often about the genius of America as applied to the art of warfare was first production. And
Yep.
we're holding examples of it today.
Now this is an M1 carbine. Now compared to the BAR, this is like holding a feather.
This is a baby.
This was designed to use, basically it was designed for support troops to have a personal weapon that didn't rely on a pistol cartridge. It shot a shorter 30-round cartridge.
Little straight cartridge, about that long, 30 caliber, 110 grains.
And the infantry guys started picking up on it. And for certain officers, platoon sergeants might carry that instead of the M1 Grand.
2 little extra magazines here on the buttstock. Can't see who made this one, but another factoid for those of you who are interested in manufacturing. All sorts of companies made weapons for the military, from Eastman Kodak and IBM to Inland, which is a division of General Motors at Remington Winchester, the gun companies. International Harvester.
Personal favorite, Rockola.
Smith Corona, the typewriter people.
Companies that make typewriters and jukeboxes were making weapons.
Yeah.
So this was not, at the time of D-Day, this wouldn't have been organic to most platoons or most squads. But once they landed and things started getting hot, the equipment changed rapidly, and each squad, each platoon would adapt to what they felt they needed for firepower.
So later on, after you see people inland when you're looking at historic film, you see more of these than you saw
Correct.
earlier. In the house-to-house.
House-to-house, because this was a great house-to-house fighting weapon.
Yeah.
Easier to turn corners with. You're not trying to sling a full-size battle rifle through.
Right.
And so it was a much more effective weapon.
Boy, you're doing good today, Troy. You just have all sorts of toys, and that's just what we have on the table. But coming up, we have a weapon that was used before the war, infamously, but during the war on the cause of freedom to very good effect.
Yes.
And that is?
It's the M1A1 Thompson, or the Tommy gun. Of course, this was a World War I weapon. It didn't make it to the trenches in time. After the war, Thompson started selling these for a pretty reasonable amount. Of course, they would come with a 50-round or 100-round drum magazine. And the gangsters in the 1920s and 30s made them popular. Al Capone, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Right. So you can tell this is a wartime model by the manufacturing differences. No fins on the barrel. The early ones were highly blued, highly machined, and were pretty guns.
Yep. You would have a forward hand grip.
Right.
You would have, starting in the late
Cuts
20s, the Cuts Compensator, which was actually developed in the jungles of Latin America when the Marines were actually using it in Dominican Republic.
These are heavy, 9.5 pounds? Something like that. But they balance so well. They don't feel like 9.5 pounds.
They ride pretty easy. It's
45 ACP, 230 grain bullet being launched about 900 feet a second, something like that. So I have a Tommy gun story for you. In our business in Colorado, southwestern corner of Colorado, we had a gentleman move in to retire there. His name is Merle Estes, and of course you can meet the guy and where you from, all this stuff, and you talk about things. So he landed on D-Day in a Rangers. and he carrying a Tommy gun, and he was talking about the fear that they had as the flotilla approached the shore, that the bombardment and the machine gun fire was scaring them to death for good reason. It was ferocious. Said so at that point in time, he said they had already exchanged most of their gear that they're supposed to be carrying for extra magazines. They knew what was coming. But he said once they engaged and got up the cliffs, they felt very well served by that 45 ACP and all that ammo they had on their backs.
That's when you go into something like that, the gear they tell you to carry sometimes isn't what you really need.
Didn't need his sewing kit.
Yeah, you want stuff that's going to support you that first 12 hours more than anything else.
Yeah. So, you know, we haven't gotten to my favorite, although the bar is pretty close to my favorite. But my emotional favorite's right over there, so Dave's going to have to follow me as I go. So I'm walking up to a terrific display of 03 Springfields in various guise, and I'll let you describe what's on the rack. But this is American weaponry at its peak.
These were the sniper rifles of the day. The 1903 Springfield has been known as the most accurate rifle produced by the United States, and up until the time of the Camp Perry matches, I think in 39 or 40, had not been outshot until the M1 Grand, a team shooting the M1 Grand stepped up and won the national matches. Start of the war, everybody's scrambling to update their arsenal and everything. For the most part, the third one down, the 1903 Springfield, that would have been issued as a stopgap measure. Marines would have carried it in Guadalcanal, early battles in the Pacific.
Right.
A lot of your support guys in the Army would have been carrying that, and most of your training went on with that because it gave for drill and for marksmanship purposes, because there just wasn't enough M1 Grands in the inventory. The top one is a National Match 1903, and it's actually been converted by the Marine Corps to a sniper rifle by putting a Yertle 8X scope on it. Those would have been, the Marine Corps loved those things in the Pacific and issued as many of them as they could get guys trained on to shoot them. And then the one below it is just the M1903A4, which is what the Army would issue as a standard sniper rifle throughout Europe.
What a terrific, let's walk back to our little spot. What a terrific opportunity for people to come here. We live in the Midwest, but I was in upstate New York over the weekend. In upstate New York, there are a lot of people who love hunting, love shooting. Some of the biggest gun clubs in the nation are on the East Coast. You just don't know they're there. So this show, Why Like Ike, is about Eisenhower, but it's also about the stuff that surrounds the years of Eisenhower. The museum here has an unparalleled collection of some things and some gaps in some things.
Right.
So we talked about doing the show, we thought about the guns of D-Day, would do the Allies, would do the Axis powers. Well, we have some gaps in our Axis power weaponry of which we want to talk about today.
Right. Since we are a part of the National Archives, we don't go out and purchase artifacts to fill in our collection. We rely on donors to bring in new and intriguing pieces to add to our collection, and there's always gaps. Every collection is going to have one.
Sure.
And certain things like German basic infantry weapons are kind of where our collection falls short. So we're always looking for somebody that might be donating.
So specifically, we are really looking for an MG42. We're going to use that as a segue to talk about this Browning over here behind the glass. But we'd love to have an MG42. Really, so you're smiling and I'm smiling on the inside. But you know, people donate things for their own reasons. We'd love to have an MG42. So you've been in one of those big automatic shoots somewhere. You have a connection to somebody and they've got one that's worn plumb out. We'd love to have that for our collection. Man,
those are something, it really doesn't matter the condition as long as we can bring it in and stabilize it.
Right.
It's not going to be shot anymore. Our purpose here is to preserve it and protect it and make it viable for centuries to come, so people can come visit and and learn about the past.
But we do have an SG-44, which not many people have in their collection.
No,
so you're a little light on the 98s of various guys?
Just the, we've got some of this, like you said, the SG-44 and K98, we're missing that.
Okay.
So it's just one of those things that we're always looking for new things to add.
All right, so that's terrific. So while we're close to this Browning, we worked our way through the squads, and I got my favorite Springfield into the discussion because my dad carried his the whole war, all the way to the Philippines, from New Guinea to the Philippines and then home. So he carried his Springfield all the way through. But there are a lot of people behind these that kept a lot of soldiers on our side alive.
Right. This is actually another World War I throwback. It's the M1917A1 Browning machine gun, and it was water cooled. It could throw out a wall of lead, and you wouldn't have to wait for it to cool down like some of the air cooled models. It was very heavy, so it was not used offensively that much. That whole setup, once you add water to it, was probably about 110, 120 pounds.
So I have a question for you. My mind tells me I saw a picture of Blackjack Pershing with that weapon in his squad usage. If you know I'm right, you can say so. If you don't, fine. But our trip south of our border had one of these loaded on a horse as well. And that was the years that Eisenhower was a corporal and sergeant.
It would have been the years that he would have been a lieutenant, and I don't think it would have been a 1917. It probably would have been a Colt machine gun, which they called the potato digger because the way the way the action worked is it dug a trench in front of you, basically.
So we're going to have people as a public interest to Google that, but you can confirm or deny whether Blackjack Pershing had the 1917A1 or not, and we would love to hear from them.
Okay.
All right. So I want to point out, this is something interests geeks, maybe not so much everybody else, but the same cartridge that's in that can tied to that 1917A1 fits in that M1 Garand and fits in that 1903 Springfield and that BAR. So weapons and ammunition commonality is a big component to resupply.
Right. That made life a whole lot easier for the logistics. Japan really had a serious problem because their machine guns fired different calibers. Right. You had some of them that had to fire oiled cartridges or grease cartridges. So if you had the wrong supply train, the wrong ammunition brought to you, you couldn't use it.
You were out of the fight.
Whereas if you had US 30 cal, you were set because it was going to go in most of your weapons.
So Dave's already told us he can't pan to the pistol case, so we're going to have to wave our hands on this one. So the most famous handheld weapon of all times that still is working today in the military, the 1911 45 ACP pistol is in that case, about second from the top. Probably the longest continuous serving weapon we have. What do you think?
Nope.
Nope. What is it?
The M2 50 caliber machine gun.
Yes.
That is the longest serving weapon there is.
Okay. So we'll see how long. How about you take the M2 and I take the 45, and let's see 20 years from now which one's still working.
That'd be a toss-up because those M2 Brownings were made really well.
Yeah.
And they were meant to take a beating as well. That's the one thing about especially the early war stuff is it was built pretty stout.
So behind us in a case, I'm going to take us off on a different one. So right below the 1903s, and Dave will get a shot of it later, on the bottom's a Johnson rifle.
Right.
So inside the Eisenhower museum here, we have examples of things that never quite made it to the front lines too, or weren't commercially successful there, but they're historic.
They're historic. With the Johnson, there's actually a Johnson light machine gun in front of it as well. The Marine Corps did use those some in the Pacific at the start, and they were very popular, especially the Johnson rifle, because you could take it down, pull the barrel out of it, and the para-Marines, which were the Marine Corps' parachute regiment, would love those things because you pull them apart, and the minute you land, slap them back together with no problems, and you're ready to go.
Dave gave me the 2 minutes. One thing doomed him, it's that little sheet metal magazine
Right.
cover that dented, and once it dented, it quit working. So we have way more stuff than we can talk about. We could talk about the manufacturing. I have maybe 5 or 6 different manufacturers of weapons that were tested for the war directly behind me. This is fantastic. You love weapons, you love hunting, you come from all over the United States. This is a great place to come, engage with us as people and engage with the exhibits. And 2019, when you've scheduled that vacation, you're going to be bigger and better and greater than we've ever had it here in Abilene before in the museum. Okay, we've had fun.
Well, thank you very much.
Troy Elkins, Dennis Weiss, right in the heart of happiness here for you today with Why Like Ike. Love to see you come visit us here in Abilene. Have a great day.